So today's talk is based on The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. Dr. Covey wrote this book on how to be the most productive in the business world. That's where it started in the 1980s, and it became one of the best sellers and is regarded in the business world as one of the main books that are used for motivation and productivity. From there, he wrote several other books, and then about 15 or so years ago, he met a principal who said, how come we're not doing this with children? Why can't we take these concepts and use these leadership ideas for children? And he said, sure, let's do it. And from there was born the Leader in Me program. So about 4 years ago, New Horizons School in Irvine adopted the program. As I came across it, one of my jobs as director is to start programs that I think will be effective. New Horizons' mission includes raising children with a positive Muslim identity, as well as being confident American Muslims. So living in this society, we want our children to not just follow the deen, but also be the leaders in it, so they are confident speakers and understand their faith. So the Leader in Me program was brought on our campus, and our staff was trained in it, and we learned all about it. So there are several books he has written, and so the one that our school that we use is the Leader in Me program, but my talk is based on one of his books called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. I highly encourage you to look at it if you want further information on how to connect with your family. There are so many programs out there today, and sometimes it feels like, and I appreciate, the parents who are here whose children have grown up and you're here today attending, because you've sort of done this already. You know more than I do, of course. But, parenting has changed a lot from the time when I was little and my parents were raising me. So we do look to other sources. And so this is another idea, another way. But as I describe the habits, you'll see that it really connects with everything that you probably do in your faith. So what we liked about the program at the school was that it ties with Islam beautifully. So talking about just living with intention, the 7 habits and all these programs that promote looking at yourself deeper, really that's the key and focus of living with intention. It's living with a purpose rather than just letting it control and decide. A lot of times we get so wrapped up and busy in our day-to-day activities that we don't really think about how to design our life. It just is on default. It's working without any input from us. SubhanAllah, it just happens. But, there are things we can do and steps we can take which will make us more productive and hopefully have healthier connections to not only ourselves but our families. So choosing a life that's well designed means that you are present in what you're doing, that you are consciously making decisions before things happen. So talking about what a successful family needs in the game of life. So every family has their unique challenges, and these needs can become overwhelming. And so where do you begin? I want to think about basketball for a minute and get some of the audience input. In order to play basketball, there's a lot of things that are needed. But if we just focused on the very basics of basketball, what would we need? Can I get audience participation? Just shout out. You need a coach. But you could do basketball without a coach. What would you absolutely need? Coach is beneficial. A team could work, but you could even play it by yourself. What else is the very basic essence? A basketball. You can't begin the game of basketball without a basketball, right? A coach is a bonus, and a team is awesome because they encourage you, but you do need a basketball. Without it, you can't play the game. There's a couple of other essential things you need. A hoop, because without it, it's just a ball. And so the game of basketball, you're shooting a hoop. And so these are like the basic components that you need to play a game of basketball. And a team, someone said, so it would be nice to have an opponent. Otherwise, you're just shooting baskets in a basket. So in the game of basketball, you do need these essentials to get somewhere. Otherwise, it's not really fun. And so in the basics for a family, there are 3 things that you also need. There are values, there are views, and your habits. So I'll go through with each of them with you. So the basic with values is the things that are most important to you represent your values. And those are the things that we place importance on. That can include people, things, and ideas. So we have some ideas up here of values. And think about for a minute, what are your your family values? Does anything come to mind? Yes, your children are a value. What are some things that you want to get out of them? Like maybe you want them to be honest, respectful, right? You want them committed. You want them to be obedient, hopefully. Anything else that comes to mind with what you really desire in your children or your family? Responsible, you want them to have these traits. From these values, you derive a point of view. And so, from the point of view, it's how you see things, it's your perspective. And sometimes, even in your own family, your perspectives might be different. Your spouse may have a very different idea of how to do something than you. Sometimes you and your spouse are connected, but your children have their own idea. We see that often, that children aren't really interested in what you value. They have their own values. So how do you come together as a family? And how we look at things is our view. So our view, it comes from various things. Our view can come from our society, and that's one of the things that are challenges for our families today. What you value may not be what your children really understand, unless you make it very obvious and clear. Our values can come from television and the media, and we try to limit that, especially as they're young, but as they're growing, children develop their own sense of value. Their friends add value to their own, circle. So it's very important for families as you're working to define your values, to see what matters to you as a family. And so how do you view your family? From those values emerges your view. Do you see yourself as good friends? And this is a blessing in our community as we grow old. Those of us who have family and parents with us, we do regard ourselves as friends, especially as we've grown up. Maybe not when we were younger. We never thought about our parents as our friends, but they certainly become that. But even as you have a younger family, do you see yourself as friends? Do you see your family as patient? This is one of those hardest things to emulate in a family. Do you see yourself as a spiritual family? For some families, well, you're here at a masjid on Saturday. I would think so. And there are a lot of your children are maybe enrolled in a Saturday program. So, or you take your children to Islamic school. So those represent that you are viewing yourself as a spiritual family. Do you value yourself as healthy? This is something that we don't think about as a core value, but this is also key. Is your family healthy? And I don't mean just physically. I mean emotionally. How are they doing as well? Is your family smart with money? It's not automatic. Like everything we do, it has to be taught specifically. So sometimes families do great. They're very close and connected, but maybe the money aspect has never really been discussed because it's not something that they're viewing as something to talk about. A lot of times in our culture too, parents shield their children from knowledge about finances and money so that they never even know if a parent is struggling. So maybe for that family, you've chosen to keep that quiet and sort of, not open for discussion. So these are things that you value and they make you unique, how you view these things. Do you value your family as a hardworking family? In some families, you're busy from morning to night. And so you definitely are placing an emphasis on hard work. Now, lastly, contributing to community. Are you giving your family the view that it's not just about them, it's about a larger cause? And I think, alhamdulillah, like our Muslim community here just in Southern California, we have demonstrated in how many masajids we have built in the last decade. We have shown that we want to contribute to community. And now in the last year or so, our community is seeing that we need to actually go out of our community and circle and embrace the different communities that are not maybe just Muslim, but we value the dialogue between interfaith discussions. So these are things that you, as you sit and ponder, these are things that you might already be doing, or you may have a goal in this area. So how you see your family offers also a limited view. If you only see what's wrong about you or your family, it's called a limited view. Like, when a horse has blinders, you only see what's there, like a tunnel vision. And sometimes that's really good when you're trying to focus on something, but other times that can be a barrier. Take a look at this picture. Could you see what you see? Anybody volunteer and tell me, do you see a picture of a lady? How many of you see an old lady? How many of you see a young lady? Both hands went up. Some of you saw an old lady, and some of you saw a young lady. Now, we could argue that it's the old lady. The people who are seeing the young lady are wrong. Or we could say, no, it's a young lady. I don't know what you're saying. She's not old. It depends on our lens. Each of us comes into this world, and we grow up in this world with our own set of glasses, even if you don't wear glasses. We have our own vision, our own perspective. That perspective colors our vision, right? So some of you, here's a picture again, saw the old lady on the right, and some of you saw the young lady. And there are a lot of these kind of pictures out there that you can search for perspective, but it's a great way to teach children about different views, because as the children are little, they only see their perspective, and sometimes as parents you only see your perspective. So it's really important to blend the two, and sometimes there are more than one point of view on something. You see that all the time. So in the Leader in Me model, it's called a see, do, and get model. The results that you get in your life depend on what you do, and what you do depends on how you see the world. And therefore, if you want to change your habits, you have to change first your paradigms. And so what are paradigms? And this is just a quote from Stephen Covey, that if you want to make significant quantum breakthroughs, you work on your paradigms. A lot of us, we just focus on our habits, and we just say, if I can just do this, if I can just do that, my life is going to be more organized. But we actually have to think about our paradigms. And that's our mental map, is how we understand and interpret the world. Here are some core paradigms that we teach our children at New Horizon when we talk about leadership. And I think some of these can resonate with even your family as you're talking about some of these concepts. So the paradigm of leadership is that, the old common paradigm is leadership is just for the few. And unfortunately, this exists in our community, where only a few handful of people get selected, maybe to the boards of masajids or, to companies. Like if you're working so hard, you've been there 20 years, but they only select just a few people because they think like it's got to be managed by a certain way. But the paradigm of leadership says that everyone can be a leader. So if you think about that idea with your family, think about how can your children be leaders. And again, some of us do this just naturally because we're trying to teach our children to be the leader. So it's not hard, but this is a challenge when they're in their teen years and they're trying to challenge you in some of the ideas. Can you share the power? Can you share that, can you share the baton? And so paradigm of potential is that a few people are gifted, that only a few people can do this job. But at the school, we teach our children that everyone has genius. So this is something you can easily do with your children if you have multiple children, or you're in a large family, or you work with a group of people. These ideas, by the way, are not limited to children and families. These are ideas that you can take with you in your own company if you work, or just even with you and your spouse, or just you. And so it's that everyone has genius, and you can find something you're good at. So a lot of times I'll take a little sidebar with this, but in our community, children are emphasized to do well academically, and we all emphasize good grades, because if they don't get the good grades, how are they going to get into med school, right? When they're in kindergarten and first grade, we're worried about their grades. We see that all the time at our school, that the child doesn't have all A's or something, like, whoa, they're failing, or the child comes home with a B, or says, I got 89, and the parent, instead of congratulating them, they'll say, what'd you miss? And I've done that with my own kids. So we know that happens. And so it's that, what's their genius? Maybe the child is just okay in academics, but maybe their strength is sports and they're a phenomenal athlete. Well, can we nurture that? Maybe they're excellent speakers and can represent and talk on our behalf. So you have to look at all the strengths. The paradigm of change is that in order to improve schools, the system needs to change. But in terms of how that impacts us in our lives, is change starts with me. So before you go and try to change things for others, you have to implement it in yourself. And a way that the model that we use was it starts with me, and then it grows into the class, and then it goes into the school. So the same way, it starts with you, and then it goes to your spouse, and then it goes to your family, your extended family, your community, so it can grow. Paradigm of motivation is that educators control and direct student learning, and then the paradigm that we use is that educators empower students to lead their own learning. So how can families use that is, how can you talk with your child to start motivating them? A lot of times I see as an administrator parents who are doing everything for their child. They don't want to have them suffer at all. And so if the child leaves their homework, at home, the mom or dad are running to drop it off, and sometimes the bigger lesson is let them have the natural consequence of missing something. We're trying so hard to protect our children that we forget that in these moments are the real lessons of life. And the last but not least, paradigm of education helps students achieve academically, but I talked about this, develop the whole person. So look at your child and your family in many different ways, not just in one lens. So habits, we talked about values, and now habits. It's something that you do over and over and over again, like, for example, how you write, how you hold your pencil is a habit. How you even part your hair. Is it this way? Is it in the middle? Is it on that side? It's a habit, right? You weren't born with a certain part. Even how you brush your teeth. Do you start in the middle? Do you start over here? Are you just going like this? Even that is a habit. Or do you do it first thing you get up? Do you do it afterwards, right? These are all habits. So let's practice what happens when you try to change your habit. So I see like a few of you are crossing your arms. So just cross your arms if you're not already. Go ahead and just cross your arms for a second. Okay. Now cross your arms in a different way. Does it feel different? It doesn't feel the same. You're kind of used to the way you do it. To switch it up, even that felt uncomfortable, right? It felt different, if not uncomfortable. And so with habits, that's normal. When you're trying to change a habit, it is going to feel weird. It is going to feel uncomfortable at times. And sometimes you're going to put these ideas and then see that it doesn't work. I don't know who this author is or who the speaker is saying it works. It doesn't work. Well, because it takes time. So habits, genuinely, there's research out there that a habit takes sometimes as long as 21 days to 55 to 60 days to 100 days. Like really you have to put it into practice. For a long time, it's a commitment before you're going to see the results coming automatically. Here are 7 habits of unsuccessful families. And some of you might find yourself in some of these areas, but remember they can be temporary. So when you or your child say, I can't do this, I can't do it. That happens commonly when we're coming across a challenge. Or you don't know what's important in your life. Everything's just getting your attention. You're just running around from one thing to another. Or you spend time doing what's not good for you. We've all had that late night snack that we know is not good for us, but it's so good and I just need something right now, and that sugary treat is it. We see this in Ramadan, when we know it's not good for us to eat all that iftar, but we're hungry and that pakora looks really good, and later on at like 2 hours later when I'm at Tarawih, I'm going to feel like, why did I eat that? But, these are things that are good in the moment, and so you just do it for you. You don't think about what's good in the long term. Or habit 4, you think if someone wins, someone always has to lose in relationships. So family discussions become battles because it's like, it's about what I said, not what you said. And some of these, like I said, may pertain to you in just how you deal with your spouse. You talk first and then listen second. This one I'll talk about in depth on how to break that bad habit. And then you do not work with others. Sometimes it's challenging, especially among siblings, to work together with each other. You know the value of them getting along. They don't. You don't take care of yourself or your family. And so I think for this one, all of us, we take care of our families to the best of our abilities, but what we neglect is ourselves. So habit 7, I'm going to talk about how you can change that paradigm. A flight plan for a successful family. So think about what habits does your family need to develop to be happier. How do you get back on course? So an airplane, when it takes off, It has a flight plan. It's not going to decide once it's in the air where it's going. The pilot knows where the destination is. But did you know that 90% of the time, once a flight takes off, it is off course? 90% of the time, the pilot takes off and they're off course. And so what do? Do they just decide, I'm not going to Chicago, I'm just going to go to the Caribbean instead? No. They rely on feedback. They rely on information from air control traffic. They rely on the weather. Sometimes everything's going fine and you're on a flight and there's turbulence, right? You weren't expecting that, and the pilot may have, may not have, but they have to make adjustments. And so even though they are off track and being impacted by all these other outside influences, because they have a flight plan, they do get back on track. They do land fairly accurately on time, most of the time. So family is very similar to that airplane flight. 90% of the time, your family is going to be off track. You're not going to have everything that you desire and wish for and lay out. Just know that, because it happens. No matter how many to-dos and checklists we put together, it's not possible to have 100% perfection in anything. We're not perfect. This is the tree of the 7 habits that we use to talk leadership to our children. For children, it's a hard concept to understand what are habits. They don't even know what that word means a lot of times. We teach it to our preschoolers all the way to 6th grade. And so they get this picture of the tree, and so at the bottom are the foundation or the roots of a tree. And so the first 3 habits are the roots that grow yourself. They're all about you. And so we tell them it starts with you. Habit 1 is be proactive. You're in charge. And I'm going to go over it in depth with each of these. Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind. Have a plan. Habit 3 is put first things first, work first, then play, because that's the only language children understand is play. And so we teach it in an easy way. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are the next tier of the habits. Once you've mastered the personal victory, it's time for the public victory. And so habit 4 is think win-win. Everyone can win. Habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. That means listen before you talk. Habit 6 is synergize. Together is better. You always improve by working together. And then the last one we say is sharpen the saw. And really just without habit 7, you can't do habits 1 through 6 successfully. So I'm going to start with habit 1. Habit 1 means you're in charge. So the common paradigm, remember I talked about paradigms, the common and the better way of thinking about it. So the common paradigm is this is just the way things are. There's not much I can do about it. I am a product of my circumstances. We all fall victim to this at some point. Like, I can't do anything. I don't know. Just it is what it is. Life is busy. I can't do anything. It's out of control. Well, highly effective paradigm says I am free to choose and my ultimate responsibility, and I am ultimately responsible for my happiness. I am a product of my choices. I mean, this is such a deep concept, and for us to teach it to children, it takes a lot of examples, and I have some I'm going to show you in just a minute. How do you teach a child that they are in charge, even when they're having a temper tantrum? So we teach them about proactive and reactive. They're opposites. Reactive is when there is no space between what is happening to you and how you respond. You react based on your moods, your feelings, and circumstances. And children often do. Something happens, a child will push one, the other one's just going to push right back. They're just being reactive. They're not thinking at all. And that's very normal at their young age. So you have to teach this idea to your children as well. And even as adults, think about a time when you were in traffic and someone cut you off. Were you reactive? Did you sort of like say something inappropriate or at least get mad like instantly? Or like sometimes, my husband will do this as he's passing by, he's going to glare at him. Like that's a must for a lot of men. And I try not to do that, but that's how we're reacting, So there is a choice in between the event and how we respond. But most of the time we're reactive, very quick. A child comes, and they want something and they're just asking you and they're not listening, and you might react by right away snapping at them. This isn't the time. Go listen. Why aren't you listening? And so that's us reacting instantly. So to be proactive, you need to create a space between what is happening to you and your response. You have to pause. You really have to build that pause. That pause can be a couple of seconds. That pause can last for a few minutes. It just depends on the situation. And so you always have that freedom to choose. When you're choosing a different reaction than what your natural instinct is, that's you being proactive. So I'm going to demonstrate that. So this is you. Just something went wrong. You know, you got cut off or something's going wrong in your life. If you're proactive, nothing happens, does it? Everything's normal. So if I open this bottle, because I was proactive and I paused and all that, nothing happened. If I take this and I'm having a bad morning, you know, should I go ahead and open this right now? What's going to happen? It's going to ruin the carpet. So, you know, when you're here, you've got to build in that pause, okay? And your pause are these 4 things. You have the freedom to choose. Self-awareness is being aware that you're mad or you're upset about something. Your conscience always tells you it's right or wrong. So relying on your conscience, we've been given this natural gift by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just ignore it a lot of times. Your imagination, like how can you deal with this scenario in a different way that you didn't imagine? It's possible. And your independent will. We have been given as humans this ability to choose. Animals haven't been given that. They do go on animal instincts. We don't. We have the ability to pause. So if I pause long enough and if I tap this bottle long enough, I'll just kind of leave it for a little bit, the bubbles will go down. So in our faith, we're told when you're angry, you can make wudu, right? That's that pause. Even if the water's not doing anything, you're like, yeah, I'm making this wudu, still angry. It's the pause. Like maybe when you go back into your element or dealing with whoever's upset you, you're going to be calmer. And if you can't make wudu, I mean, just pause for a minute and do deep breathing. Even taking, we tell our children, we teach this to our students, take 2, 3 deep breaths. Count to 10, right? Why do we tell our children count to 10? It's because we're building that pause in. So hopefully that when it's opened, it's not going to squirt out. So stop when you're trying to react. Stop and see what you can do and pause. Think about what you can or you cannot do, and then choose the best thing to do. So we have examples of this throughout our own literature from the Quran and the Hadith. The Prophet ﷺ cautioned us to control our emotions. He emphasized that we should not be reactive but show our strong character by taking control of testing situations. So in Bukhari Sharif, we say the strong is not the one who overcomes the people by his strength, but the strong is the one who controls himself while in anger. This is such a powerful reminder that it is human to be angry, but it is completely in our control to pause and stop and reflect. Another thing with being proactive is teaching your family and yourself some proactive language. Instead of saying, I can't do this. Children often do that when they're trying a task and they're struggling with it. But teaching them, I can. One of the ways we teach it to our students at our school is we teach the power of yet, a growth mindset, that you don't know it yet. Maybe you can't right now, but at some point it could happen. So it takes a while sometimes to learn it. A lot of times we'll see kids say, it's not my fault. Like they don't want to take responsibility. And the proactive way is saying, I'm sorry, recognizing that they messed up. Or, I have to do this. I have to go this morning to IOK. No, I don't. I choose to, right? So it's how I look at things. Sometimes when we're really frustrated in our lives, how we look at things really helps us, how we position ourselves in our statements. Or we have no other choice. Well, let's look at all our options. Or they won't let me. That's the classic one that older kids use. Like, my mom won't let me. I want to, but I can't. My mom won't let me. And the opposite is, I can get this done. Or like if it's something your family doesn't value, then being strong enough to talk about it. And just giving up. There's nothing we can do about it. We're stuck. Well, there are other things you can do, right? And so another aspect of habit 1 is your circle of control. And so this circle in the middle is what you can control and influence. The circle on the outside is what you can't control. And it's your circle of concerns. Every one of us has fears or worries. And some of those fears we can control and do something about. Others we have no control over. And so these are some of the items. So in the middle, you can control how you eat. It's under your control. You can choose to exercise or not exercise. You can decide what you want to watch on TV. Those are things under your control, or what you want to learn. Can you really control how tall you are? Can you decide I'm going to be 7 feet tall? I can't even be 5'6". Well, unless I wear heels, right? I can't control those things. What about, like, the gas prices? Is that in my control? No, it's frustrating. Maybe my solution would be to buy a hybrid or an electric car. That I can control, but I can't dictate how the oil prices are going to be. And so these are examples. As we are looking at frustrations, we remind ourselves, is this something that's in my circle of influence or circle of concern? In my influence are certain things I can do to change my thinking, or is this so out of my hands that I've just got to accept it and move on? That's a very good habit to teach first yourself and then your children and family. And so when you're reactive, you're giving up that control, and then your influence shrinks. If you're just so overwhelmed by everything and you can't change anything, there's not much you can do. The opposite is when you're proactive and you try to take control of things. Maybe not the element that you're trying to control, but coming up with other ideas that can help you feel more powerful. Like, I can't control the start time of this, but I can control how early I get up to do this task. So that's sort of a recap of habit 1. With habit 2, I think that's such a deep habit, so I hope I can do service to it. But it really, I think for me, in my personal learning of this program, habit 2 has been one that I have probably recognized as one of the hardest to control and do things about, but it's possible. A common paradigm of thinking with habit 2 is, I live by default. I can't predict how my life will turn out, so I just go with the flow. For the longest time in my life, I was just going with the flow. Get up, go to school, be the student, come home, eat dinner, go to sleep. Sometimes help with dishes. And as I was growing up, my mom was really generous and didn't ask for a lot of help other than cleaning maybe the house, right? So that was just my life. I didn't think about any goals. I liked to do writing, and so I thought, okay, I'll just become a journalist. But that was about it. That was the extent of my planning. But now that I look at habit 2 and how deep it is for a family, we as a family, alhamdulillah, I don't know, sometimes I think like it just happened. We were on automatic and it just happened, but I had loving parents, and they always support me, and they're here today too, alhamdulillah, just to offer that support. And so the highly effective way is you live by design. You choose and define your vision and purpose. What's your purpose in life? And imagine giving that gift to your children at a young age, that they start really thinking about what's of value and what do they want to do in the bigger picture. And so this is something I would highly recommend you do first with yourself before you teach your children this. It includes 2 things: envisioning your outcomes before you act, and then creating and living by a personal mission statement. So the ultimate goal, as in our faith, our ultimate goal is to go, inshallah, to Jannah. That's our end in mind. And because of that end in mind, we do a lot of things in our day-to-day life to make sure that we are pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our end goal. Like, that's the simplest way I can describe it. But in our day-to-day life and, activities, we can't just say, well, I'm just going to wait and my goal is just to get to Jannah, inshallah. Like, there's a lot more that's going to require of me in this life. My job has a lot of requirements. My responsibilities as a wife has its own requirements. My responsibilities as a mother brings its own requirements. And the same goes for all of you. So defining outcomes before you act. All things are created twice. This is a concept that I found very interesting when I started looking at habit 2. Before you act on something, you define the outcome. So I have my dad in the audience. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Before a building gets designed, I just blew it, but before a building can get constructed, before you build the next project, what's the first thing that has to be done? So my dad's an architect, so you'd have to do the design, right? You can't just say, oh, we're going to put a house there, Or, okay, I'm going to build my condominium thing that I'm going to rent out for income. No, it had to have a design and a plan. You can't decide, like, we're just going to make a masjid here. This masjid took a lot of design and planning and fundraising. So think about your life. It's not going to happen just like that. You actually have to think about things. So even something as simple as having a productive meeting. Before you can have a productive meeting, you have to have a creative agenda, a concise agenda that can get things done, right? You can't just go in and walk in. Like, for me to come here, I had to envision the outcome. I couldn't just show up this morning. I had to plan, right? Not only my presentation, but how long it's going to take me to drive here. That was all part of the plan. I began with the end in mind. The end is right now. But before that came a lot of planning. And so we do that sometimes very, very purposefully, and other times it just happens. We're not even thinking about it. And so this includes even your day to day. Remember the end goal? We talked about such a large goal, but what do you do in your day to day? How do you want your day to end? Or how do you want that really important meeting that you're going to have at your work to end? Or how do you want, if you're having a gathering that you're planning, you plan the menu, right? You don't just start making food when the guests show up, hopefully. You plan if you're going to get it catered, if you're going to cook yourself. Those all require planning. And so even something as sitting down with your family and friends at dinner, right? It requires some effort sometimes. And so just remember that, like, before you can get to the results, you obviously have to do the first step, which is a mental creation. And then the second step is the actual execution, the physical creation of something. And so the other idea behind Habit 2 is a good mission statement. It clarifies what's important to you and your deepest values, and it gives you a purpose. Your mission statement is not something that you're going to change every day. It is really something that you hold near and dear to your heart, and it might take some time to create. Did you have a question? Yes. Yes, please, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm going to talk about that too in the next habit and hopefully answer some of that question. Like, you can't plan everything. You're right. Highly effective people. Yes, yes. So great question. Like, you're right. And I'm glad you brought this point up right now, because as you plan, remember, this is the master plan. Just recognize that there are going to be off days. Remember the flight we talked about, that you're off 90% of the time in a flight? You're off track. So in your family too, you're going to plan, and you will be successful maybe 10% of the time at the beginning. Your idea and goal is to improve, and that with time, with effort and forgiveness, honestly, right? You can't expect yourself to be this perfect human being who's going to have this plan, who's going to be this regulated and regimented. And I've seen that too, parents who go that really regimented route, and they have no room, no breathing space where their children are scheduled from morning till they wake up to the point where they go to sleep. You're absolutely right. You can't plan everything. But this is talking about a master plan, like, what do you value? And so the mission statement will sort of help and answer that question. What are the deep things that we want our family to represent about themselves? And so ask your family these kind of questions. What kind of family do you want to be? Do you want to be a family that contributes to society? Maybe that's not on your agenda right now because you've got little kids and you're just barely making ends meet. Do you want to be financially successful? Well, that's going to require some things, right? It's not going to be automatic. What kind of feelings do you want to have in your home? This is something we don't talk about. Just we're on autopilot. Our children sometimes behave, sometimes they misbehave. You have to establish these things that you value. How do we want to treat one another and speak to each other? As your children grow, they have their own brains and identities, and I'm seeing that. I have 2 children, and they're 18 and 16. What I could teach them at age 8 and 9 without much difficulty, now they have their own ideas and their own thinking, and so they could challenge me. But under that, we have guidelines in our family that, well, you have to do it with respect, right? You can't just argue for the sake of arguing. Why? Because that's part of our mission statement too. That if you're going to express your ideas, it has to be done in a respectful manner. And so that is something that you want to discuss with your family. What are things that are highest priority goals? Maybe your family is planning a vacation, right? And that is going to be a short-term goal, but that's important too. Are you going to ask the children for input? Are you going to just decide for yourself or with your wife or husband? And so it's like these important questions have to be discussed together as a family. Even when your children are young, asking them some questions helps. So some missteps to avoid when you're making a personal statement, mission statement, is don't announce it ahead of time. Don't just say, this is what our family is going to be like. Because now you're just dictating and telling them what you want. You're not asking for any input. The best thing you can do is, for those who are married, to talk first with your spouse and see how do they feel about these things. You may have very different ideas. So before you start sharing this with your children, you have to talk about it with your own significant other. Like, what is the most important thing that you value? How do you want us to do this, right? And then you take it to your children. Don't rush through it. It's not something you're going to whip out in like one day or half an hour. Like, we're going to have a family meeting. We're going to talk about this. Let's get this done. It can't be done right away. It's a process. It takes a little while. It takes a few conversations. And so the process is just as important as the product. It requires a lot of listening from you too. And then don't ignore it. It has to be translated into everyday living. Once you actually have a statement, you got to refer back to it. So in our classrooms, each classroom, for example, we have a school mission. And then the classroom established their own mission statements, and then the teachers established their own. Actually, first the teachers had to establish their own mission statement. What represents them? What do they value? And then they have to teach it to the children. So at our school, one of the things we've done is every child has a mission statement of what they value, what they want to improve on. And this can change over time. You know, what you might value today in a year might look different. So you have to account for that and know that it's going to shift. Here are some examples of family mission statements. And the question to ask is, how can we help run our house as smoothly as possible? And so this family mission statement, I don't know if you can read, it says to be a unified family, cultivating genuine relationships, and living an active, debt-free lifestyle is their vision, and their mission is to seek God's will for their marriage and family while balancing fellowship, health, education, and finances. And I thought it kind of encompassed the habits quite well. So moving on to habit 3. This is very key in how do you plan. Once you've got the master plan, how do you bring it down to day to day? It's the habit of putting the most important things first, not the most urgent. It's looking at your mission, your values, and your roles and goals before you decide. It's learning to separate from the urgent to important, and then eliminating the unimportant things. So the common paradigm way of thinking is, I spend time on what's urgent. I'm only going to do what's right now important, is I've got to do X. And so I'm only looking at X. I'm not looking at anything else in the week. Highly effective way is I spend time on what's important. So when you spend time on what's most important, you have increased organization, you have fewer crises, and you have a reputation that you build for follow-through that, so if someone says she's going to do that, she absolutely will do that. And it creates more balance and peace of mind. So if you look at the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we realize that he was very goal-oriented and task-oriented individual. He didn't waste any time. He prioritized his tasks and tackled them with the utmost efficiency. He was given 23 years to deliver the entire message of the Quran. And after that message, he left. And so I would say that his life is a great example of being efficient and eliminating the unimportant. But that doesn't mean he didn't spend time with his family or his grandchildren. He made sure that those people around him, his Sahaba, had that feeling of importance, right? He never gave that feeling of, you're not important to me right now. So the best example, of course, is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other powerful concept is the quadrants of time. This is something I learned when I first heard about the habits. It's a lot of things on there, so I want to explain it. I don't know if this can work. It's okay. So in the upper left-hand corner, you see urgent and important. This is where most of us operate on our day-to-day. It's the quadrant of necessity. We ultimately want to work to reduce this quadrant activities. This is like the firefighting part of us. You know, when there's a fire, the firefighter's got to go out and put out the fire, right? He can't go and say, well, today I've got to do this first. I've got to go take this important health exam. Not when he's on duty as a firefighter. He's got to go put the fire out. So when we operate in quadrant 1, we are reacting to deadline-driven projects. We are reacting to anything urgent, like a medical emergency. If, God forbid, you have a medical emergency and you've got to go to the hospital, can you say, let me go to this davat first, you know, this dinner that I've been invited to? No, you can't. You've got to prioritize and you've got to put your attention on your emergency. Unfortunately, some people do neglect the medical emergencies and waste time before they can get care. So there is an importance of emphasis on when it's urgent, do that. And then last minute preparations. Sometimes that's where you're operating because you've got to finish all those things before you can get to other stuff. The quadrant that gets left out often is right across from that, where it's not urgent, but it is important to you. So this is the quadrant of quality, and you want to increase activities in this quadrant. So habitual proactive actions, like your emphasis on exercise, for example. It's important. I know it's important for my health, but I've got to really go to that deadline that's important, so then I never really spend time exercising, right? That's a very common thing that impacts a lot of us. Important goals. Well, I really want to learn how to speak Arabic, for example, but I never take any steps towards it because I'm busy, right? That's the most common thing we hear. Relationship building. This is such a key part of how do you grow and nurture your family and relationships, your friends. If you never make time for that, how do you expect that is going to be of value to your children and to your friends? If you never show up and you're always making excuses that I'm going to be there, but I'm busy. I'm busy. Well, the message is that you're busy. You're not there to build that relationship. So then we act surprised when that friendship dissolves or our children don't want to be around us, or they say, well, you're busy, I'm doing my own thing now, right? So the time to invest is quadrant 2. Quadrant 3 is a quadrant of deception. Seems like it's important, but it's really not there. You can sometimes get away by delegating some of these tasks or minimizing your time, like timing yourself, like how long am I going to spend on emails? If I'm working and I've got to answer emails, it's part of my job, but do I want to spend 3 hours on it? No. Do I want to spend 1 hour on it? No. You know, I have to prioritize first the most important things in the day and definitely check what I need to respond to. Frequent interruptions are part of quadrant 3. When you start a task and you get distracted by something, that's you operating in quadrant 3. When you never get the task done because you have a lot of distractions. Or sometimes it's urgency masquerading as important. A lot of times when we do things in our day-to-day, we recognize it's not that important, but it seems urgent, so we keep giving our time to it. And then what happens is, again, we have no time for quadrant 2. And so quadrant 4 is considered the quadrant of waste, where you want to avoid this as much as possible. This is your busy work, your escaping activities, your excessive relaxation. If you ever turn on the TV just for like a little bit of relaxation, and the next thing you know, you've watched 4 episodes of the show, like you binge watched it on Netflix or something, that's quadrant 4. If you go on like Facebook, just really quickly, I want to check and see what time the event is at IOK, and before I know it, half an hour has gone by. Oh, I didn't even know, half an hour just went by. This happens to me all the time. I open up Pinterest, and I'm like, I just want one little thing. I want to get that one idea I had, and boom, I've spent like half an hour, and then I'm like, oh, it's gone. I can't get that time back because it's gone, right? And so it's really important, like think about this for a minute. Which quadrant, and you don't have to answer out loud, but which quadrant are you operating in most of the time? Where are you at? And why are you there? Maybe you're already in quadrant 2. Great. But most of us aren't. I'm not. You know, I have to purposefully design my day so I can do more things in quadrant 2. And so think about in quadrant 2, which activities are you doing or you want to do? Those things that you want to do, you have to schedule them. And then think about, you know, which ones you can delegate and which ones can you get rid of. So that's kind of a way to think about your planning before you actually do it. So once you decide on what's important to you, you choose your personal and professional roles. This was a new way for me to learn about planning my week. For me, habit 3 is probably the most interesting and productive, especially as a working person. I want to make the maximum benefit of my time. And so we were told to look at your roles. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a daughter. I am a friend. I am an administrator at a school. These all are my roles. And so I have to, if I really want to have the best feeling of my productivity and my life goals being achieved, I have to think about those roles and what I can do to make them important. If I don't schedule that time, then it's not going to happen automatically, and then I'm going to feel forced. And so we're taught to first go ahead and choose your big rocks. And so this picture is that, and I'm going to demonstrate it for you right now. And so this is your life, okay? If you just operate in quadrants 1 and 3, this is your life. This is all your stuff that takes your day. Well, I've got some really important things too. You know, I want to make sure that I eat healthy, that I exercise, maybe that I take my daughter to her driving test, you know, cook family meals, go out with my family, and so on. Like, these are all my really important rocks. They're called the big rocks because they're important. Well, what just happened? I still got some big rocks, but what just happened? My life is full. I don't have room for it anymore. So now when I'm trying to plan these things, it's not going to happen. But here is my life with a purpose and a plan. I will start with the big rocks first. Sorry for the noise, but making sure I schedule those things first. And maybe my life in each week won't have all these priorities. I hope not. But just to give you a visual. Well, my big rocks are in. Now I can add the other things. And my big rock does include my job because that takes a significant part of my life. I can't just be inauthentic and say, well, that's not going to take time. Of course it will. It's going to take most of my time. Or as a mom who's taking care of her children, all those things that go with raising your children is in here. But now I have time for other stuff. And so you see, you were able to fit almost everything. There are some things left in here, but maybe they're not important. And it's okay. This is that answer to that gentleman who was asking, well, you can't always plan. You're right. Sometimes things happen and you can't have everything that you want. You just have to let go of it too. And so here's another idea of how to think about quadrant 2. This is, for me, a very powerful reflection piece. Every single one of us is given 168 hours in a week. Just the mere fact of just being alive, all of us are given 168 hours. Fair amount. No matter who you are in this world, no matter what your status, no matter your age, all of you have the same number of hours. It's what you do with it that differs, right? So if you took away your 40-hour work week, if you took away your 56 hours of sleep, if you were getting healthy hours of sleep every day, if you took away, the normal amount of time meals take, commuting, showers, getting ready for your day, that's another 42 hours. You are still left with the green zone. That is 30 some rough hours to spend on what you want to pursue your dream. Okay, what's important and that you never get time to devote to. So a lot of times we hear people say, I'm so busy. Things are so busy right now. It's so hectic. For sure. But are you putting priority on it? If it's not a priority, it's not going to happen. So this is a different way of looking at it. And when I heard this talk, it's a TED Talk actually, 168 hours that you can listen to. Sort of was a light bulb moment for me. Like, wow, I actually do. So even if I do maybe not 30, because, maybe it's just 2 a week on something I really value and I want to do. then I've done it. I've devoted time to something that's important. So in family, it's doing these kind of things, prioritizing, one-on-one bonding times with your children. This is something I'm awful at, but I try to build in. And I'm getting a little bit better at it. Like, if you have multiple children, it's really hard to give them individual attention. But I know from experience, and I know from a lot of the research, that if you can give individual time to that bonding, it's going to give you significant results. So building that into your family's routine is important. Or maybe just even giving your one-on-one time to another significant relationship in your life. When I have done that, I always walk away feeling good and go, why don't I do this more often? For families, devoting regular weekly family time, a designated time once a week, because our family life is so busy nowadays, and actually having all family members attend and plan together is very important, especially as the children have more and more activities. You want to discuss with them, what is going to take their time this week, so you know ahead of time what the commitments are. And actually planning fun activities. As they're young, we do this easily, but as they get older, we think that they have their own friends, we don't need to do anything, and we sort of slip away from that bonding time. And then the last but not least is building family rituals and traditions. So we think of like our holiday, Eid holiday. We have certain traditions that our children have grown up with, whether it's waking up at iftar or sahur, and eating the meal that's a traditional meal in your family. Maybe for Chandrat, you go and you have henna and mehndi put on, and those are traditions you've built in to your family. But think about other things that you and your family do that are traditions and rituals. It could be even a place you go to eat regularly. That restaurant is like your family's restaurant. That's a tradition, right? We don't have to be all grand about it. For me, I was thinking, my daughters and I, every year when they were young, and even now sometimes they want to go, because I was a teacher, I was always collecting books. So Scholastic Warehouses would have a book fair every year. And my initial interest was just going and getting cheap books from my class library, but it became a family tradition as I would take my girls with me, and they would go through and buy the books. And to this day, when that Scholastic, if an email comes, they would ask me, can we still go? And I had to say, really? You're not even reading those like little books anymore. But there was something amazing about that experience for them that they wanted to continue. And so we still try to do things like that. Any tradition that you can build in, small or big, it doesn't have to be grand. It's going to give you a lot more connection to your children. So moving to habit 4, once you've put those 3 habits, 1, 2, and 3, you've gained sort of a personal victory, not just for your family, but yourself. And so habits 4, 5, and 6, I'm going to go through them a little bit more rapidly, because this has to do with your work with others. How you get along is part of habit 4 and 5 and even 6. So the common way of thinking habit 4 is there's only so much, and the more you get, the less there is for me. This is a very common thing that children think about, like, that's not fair, I'm not getting any, you got the bigger piece, that's not cool, right? That's kind of what they're operating in when they're thinking like this. But the highly effective way is that there's plenty out there for everyone and more to spare. It's teaching the children an abundance mentality, like everybody gets a piece of the pie, it's okay. Maybe yours is smaller, maybe yours is bigger, but you all get it, right? So this idea, it's a little selfish way of thinking that it's just in it for me. What's in it for me? Think win-win teaches them that it's about everyone. We have to think about how to be balanced, and show consideration. And that respect part that I was talking about can come here too. And how do you create win-win agreements? So building the emotional bank account is sort of the foundation of this habit. You have to build the trust first before you can expect that your child or your family is going to just understand win-win. How you build that trust is you put in an emotional bank account. You're depositing positive things over time so that when things go off, when there is conflict, they still trust you, that you are going to be sincere and consistent in your how you're going to handle that conflict. So I think remembering that close relationships require more deposits is really key. We are the nicest to the people that matter the least to us. Often. When the person's not important to us, we're so polite. We're so nice. We would never tell the bank teller anything rude, right? We would never tell our boss something. Why is it that we treat the people in our family with the least respect, with the least? It's just natural. It happens to every family. But if you think about the emotional bank account, how many deposits can you put in, positive things? Then they're going to understand too that even if you're mad at them right now, you really care about them in the long run. And I got an example of this just very recently this week. My daughter and I, we had an argument about something, and I tried to pause. Remember, I tried to be reactive, and I was making good, progress, and then I lost it. I went back to being reactive, and she was angry. And it lasted 2 days, which was about very long for me. I can't be angry like that for that long with my children. It bothers me. I didn't have peace of mind. And last night, she started talking to me, and I was like, okay, this has gone too long. I'm not happy with this. And she actually started just discussing things. And because I had put all those emotional deposits, and I had so many deposits in the bank with her, even though I disappointed her in how I reacted, she could forgive me. And at the end of our discussion, I wasn't that angry parent anymore. We had an agreement. I said, okay, this is going to happen over and over again, but how can we manage this so I don't lose my cool? And because she's her own person, and she said, Mom, I have my own way of thinking too. You're forgetting that. And so, of course, she's 18. I want her to be independent too. I want her to make her decisions. So when she said that, I just said, okay, she got it. But now I can't argue as a parent, just stand my ground. It was such an authentic example of win-win for me that in the end, even if though we disagreed about something, it was a win-win because in the end, she did understand where I was coming from. And I said, well, you were being reactive, and I didn't like that you were disrespectful when you were talking, right? Because it's normal human that everything's not going to be perfect. She said, yeah, I'm sorry about that. And so for a child to recognize that within a day or two, that something significant was happening, that it was wrong, at the end of the night, I was at peace with myself. Even though we do not agree on the situation, I was like, the relationship is intact. That's what's going to matter more. So now the next time, I can go back to it and say, remember we talked about that? Remember we said we don't agree? Well, how can we reach that agreement? So it's putting in that time, putting in that respect, putting in listening to both sides that helped me create that. And so here are some ways that you can add deposits, where you keep your promises. A withdrawal is the opposite of that, where you break a promise. For a child, when you say you're going to do something, especially busy dads, I don't want to pick on you, but a lot of times you go, oh, we're going to do this, yes, and then you can't because you're busy with your job. That promise that you broke may go farther than you realize. So remember, when you make that promise, to try and commit to it. Happened again 2 days ago. I said, okay, I'll take you to one of my daughters, and I really didn't want to. By the end of the day, I was tired. I was like, I don't really want to, but I had made a promise, and I even had an offer from some friends, like, hey, let's go and do this activity together. And I really wanted to go with my friends, right? Because I was like, I'll get to relax, but I had made a promise. So I said, no, I have a commitment already. I got home, I went out, and it was actually a really nice 1 hour that we spent together. So keeping those promises is a very important part of building that bank account, because then they trust you. Again, you're building that trust. It's a long-term thing you're working on. Listening and, recognizing, saying that you're sorry. These are all things, even as parents, that's so important to apologize for when you've done something wrong. If we want our children to do it, we have to model that, obviously, and swallow our pride a little bit and say, you know what? Yeah, I was wrong. And so then that's going to earn a lot more respect and make them feel connected to you. So this is another example from the Quran of, not insulting one another. We have so many examples in our faith of how to be so that we are kind to one another. So there are 4 ways of thinking. You have the win-lose scenario, where somebody thinks that if they get something that you're not getting it, and that there's not enough for both. That's that lack of abundance. A lose-win is that, if you win, I'm losing. So like if you got the remote, the arguments with the remote, if you've got like 2 children, or if like one person always wants the remote in the family, they're feeling like, well, you got the remote and I got nothing. So that's a lose-win. A lose-lose is where you're just arguing about something, you're not getting anywhere. So if you're arguing about that remote, you end up throwing that remote across, and like now nobody has it, you both lost, and you broke it, so now you're in trouble. Um, and then win-win is basically that you work together to decide how you're going to overcome that challenge, how you're going to move beyond. And so it's not just you or me, it's about both of us working together. And so a way to think about it, Stephen Covey says, think win-win is a frame of mind and heart that seeks mutual benefit and mutual respect. It's not thinking selfishly or like a victim. It's thinking in terms of we, not me. And then we also have an example from our faith. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said, the dua of a Muslim for his brother in his absence is readily accepted, and an angel is appointed to his side. Whenever he makes a beneficial dua for his brother, the appointed angel says, Ameen, and may you also be blessed with the same. So it's really thinking about, like, sometimes you don't want to let go. And it's not even about your children. It's about something that's happening in your own life. And you're like, I don't want to. This is what I believe. No. But it's really thinking about, in the long term, if you can say something beneficial to the one who has hurt you, then you're earning your own, good deeds in this life. So moving to habit 5, it's listening before speaking. Really, in the simplest way is practicing listening, showing respect and mutual understanding. So how do we do that? Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. Can I get assistance? I don't know how that happened. I think it's just the internet connection. Somebody from, thank you, Sister Iman. So I'll just kind of talk about that because you don't need to see the slide. But it's most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Often so many of us are so busy with our internal conversations in our minds that we're not even listening to whoever's talking. We're just waiting to respond to what we can say before, anything else. I think it just somehow lost the Wi-Fi. Yeah. So I'm going to go to plan B. No, I think he got it. Thank you. No problem. Is it coming? Okay. So here we go. How do you listen for understanding? You take your time. If you're in the middle of a discussion and you really want things to resolve, you can't rush through it in 5 minutes. It's better to table that and say, right now is not a good time for us to talk about this. Let's come back when we both have time. Or like if you're angry and you're like being that reactive, just stop and say, this isn't the time. I want to listen and I want to respond. So let's talk about it in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Avoiding door slammers, which are when you're just criticizing and you're talking about yourself and you're giving advice. Remember the story I just shared with you about my daughter? Again, it's okay. I don't need it. I could keep talking and just focus here. I don't know. Sister Iman, are you here? Maybe we can get it going. But anyway, it's when I was having that discussion, I kind of fell into this trap of criticizing and talking about myself. When I was little, my mom had this expectation, and they don't care. In that moment, if you want to make a conversation last and have them listen to you, then you need to stop giving advice. Sounds like the most natural thing. That's what parents are supposed to do. You're supposed to give advice to your children. That's your job. But not in that moment of deep discussion or if there's an argument that's going on. You actually have to listen first and then talk second. It's listening with your eyes, hearts, and ears. It's really listening, not just like this is what I'm going to say. It's trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, listening for their point of view rather than just interpreting from yours, whether you agree or not. You don't have to agree. You just have to understand that I'm listening with the intent to understand. This happens like even at work. We practice this with teachers and students. Like, this is hard. I don't agree with you, but I'm going to listen first before I respond. And then reflecting is a really key part. Once they've talked, sharing words like, using the words you and avoiding I. Don't talk about yourself in as little as you can in that first moment. That doesn't mean you don't talk and that you never give your opinion. It's seek first to understand, then be understood. So the first part is listening. The second part is responding once you think you really understand what they're talking about. Okay, so using, things like tell me about it instead of giving your opinion. Or, okay, so you're saying that you really don't like it when I am telling you this part. Okay, but I'm going to tell you why I'm saying this to you, right? Or so you feel like this about this, right? These are ways to keep that door open, because otherwise, if you just do your advice, do they actually listen to you? Do your children actually listen to you when you just start going and giving your magnificent advice in that moment when they're mad or upset about something? They don't. They don't want to. And so, one way that we're reminded in the Quran is the good response and the bad response is not equal. Yes? We're good? Okay. So the one, you shall resort to the nicest possible outcome and response. Thus, the one who used to be your enemy may become your best friend. Remember, your end goal is to have a deep relationship with your children and your spouse, so it's remembering these things. Habit 6 is synergize, and so the common way of thinking is it's either your way or my way or compromise. That's the only way it's going to work. But habit 6 says that together we can create something that is better than what either of us had in mind. So with that, when you're not even compromising, you come up with innovative ideas, new and better solutions, transformed relationships, and appreciation of different perspectives that you normally wouldn't have when you are just focusing on, let's just compromise, okay? And so it's really looking at the whole is better than the sum. So a car has, a horn, it's got an engine, it's got doors. Well, individually, does it matter? Can you drive when you just have the horn and the wheel and the engine? No, you need all pieces together. So it's looking at the whole thing is better than just the parts. It's valuing and appreciating differences, not just tolerating or accepting them. And then you're working together to come up with those different ways. So how do you do that with the family? You do where you define the problem, and then they tell you their way, you tell your way, and then you come up with different ideas. That's not just your way or their way. Sometimes that brings out newer ideas that you didn't even think about. And that's synergizing, putting the third alternative, we call it. Now it's gone again. It's okay, I'm almost done. So sharpening the saw is the 7th habit. And the common way is I'm too busy. We talked a lot about that earlier. I'm too busy to take time for myself. This is the habit of renewal. This is the one that I actually want to focus a lot of time on, but I usually don't. Let me try and learn what you're doing. It wants me to end. Okay, there we go. So highly effective way is that I take time for myself every day because it gives me the ability to do everything else. If I don't take care of myself, can I really take care of my family? When you get on an airplane and they start doing that announcements for safety, in the event of an emergency, an oxygen mask will drop. What do they tell you to do? Put it on yourself first, then your child, right? If you are not breathing your own oxygen, you can't expect that your child is going to be well. Okay, so you have to take care of yourself first. I'm looking at the ladies because you are the ones who neglect yourself over your family the most. And some of you men as well. You only look at your highest priority, bringing in, financial stability, but you don't take care of yourself. So the idea is to maintain and increase effectiveness. You have to renew yourself in 4 different ways: your body, your heart, your mind, and soul. So looking at your daily private victory. Before you can have victory of the world, you've got to do this daily private victory. And so the physical is your body, your mind, your emotional is your heart, and the spiritual is your soul. So as you renew in each area, then you can have growth and change in your life, and it can actually make you more productive. And so I never devoted time to exercise, like never. It's always last on my priority, even though I know it's important. But in the last about year or so, and specifically the last 2 months, I started doing a procedure in the morning. Even today I did it. Even though I had to come here and I was looking at my time, I scheduled it in. And it starts with focusing on myself, doing these 4 things. So exercising, like I built it in. I did it for 10 minutes. That was like, okay, I did it. Because at least it got done. It was on a priority list. Sleeping well, actually, I made sure I slept enough that I could drive here, and I have the weekend to catch up on my sleep, but I need to build that in. Relaxing, managing stress, meditation, these are all like different ways, that people can actually grow, and eating healthy obviously belongs here too. I'm not going to do well if I keep drinking that coffee that I know is bad for me, and I never feed my body any nutritious things. And then the mind is growing your mind. We don't even think about this as a way to renew ourselves, but reading and writing something or learning a new skill or hobby, it opens your mind and you are open to learning new things. And so every day I actually read. Every day, no matter how late I am, I will read for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and I write, I journal for 5 minutes. So I give myself as little as 1 minute to maximum 5 minutes. Half an hour, I'm done. And I've given myself this personal victory. Focusing on your emotional dimension is really important when you're building that relationship, which we talked about. When you give service, so when you're coming and devoting yourself to the masjid, that's a way to grow your heart and emotional dimension. Laughter, even something as simple as laughing at jokes with your kids and your family members, that's a way to focus on that. And then last but not least is your soul and your spirituality. In Islam, we're lucky that this is the sole focus of us. We were created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we're following that, we already have this part mastered. But a lot of us, realistically, how devoted can you be when you're doing your salah? Are you doing the chicken pecking the ground way of salah? Are you really focusing? Like, what's the benefit of your salah if we're not really in it spiritually? We're not really even focusing on talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a way for us to just slowing down, thinking deeply, just really contemplating, even for 2 minutes in your day, what am I going to do today that's going to bring me success? Even for a minute, having that intention in the morning is the best time. Like, it's amazing. It's in our faith. We get up for Fajr. This community that I started doing, they're not Muslim, and they say, okay, you got to get up early to be that productive, and you got to get up at 5:30, and a lot of people can't do that. They're like, I can't wake up at 5:30, and I'm thinking, wow, Fajr just makes that automatic for me. I have to get up early, right? And then it's like really focusing on our spiritual growth. And so I'm reminded of this quote: people who can't find time for recreation are obliged sooner or later to find time for illness. But for me, this is like a really clear example. A year ago, I was struck with illness, and I got very sick, and I realized the value of this habit 7, because since then, in order for my recovery, I've been focusing on health. I've been focusing on exercise, growing myself, my mind, and I'm more at peace. And so if I hadn't maybe come across that experience, I might not have been devoting time to all these things. But I really think it's true. When we're not focusing our time on wellness, then are we going to have time to focus on our illness? Then it's out of our hands, and we have to. And so with our family, it's spending time. All these people look so happy. Can you see it? No, it's gone. In the picture, there are all these happy people, and sometimes it's not the happiest when you plan your family time. Sometimes you argue. It's okay. Like, that's part of being a family. I was at Disney World with my family, and we were arguing, and it was unreal. And when you go to Disneyland, you're reminded, this is the happiest place on earth. And you're arguing, or you're not happy, or your child wants that snack and you don't want to give it to them, right? It's okay. Just still devoting that family time is going to be key. And then just even exercising together with your family, learning new things together, having some fun activities that are just your family things. Those are some ways to build that family renewal. And so just final thoughts on this is the most beloved of deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that are continuous, even if they are few. So I've shared with you content that usually takes 8 to 12 hours of training. This whole program takes a long time to really go deep. But idea is to just share briefly, so you can even take 1 or 2 ideas from today and put it into your family. And I'm going to end with a story of the Chinese bamboo tree. And it comes from Dr. Covey's book. So the parable of the Chinese bamboo tree. In everything you do in your family, keep in mind the miracle of the Chinese bamboo tree. After the seed for this amazing tree is planted, you see nothing, absolutely nothing, for 4 years except for a tiny shoot coming out of a bulb. During those 4 years, all the growth is underground in a massive fibrous root structure that spreads deep and wide in the earth. But then, In the 5th year, the Chinese bamboo tree grows up to 80 feet. Just in the 5th year. So many things in your family are like the Chinese bamboo tree. You work and you invest time and effort and you do everything you can possibly do to nurture growth, and sometimes you don't see anything for weeks, for months, or even years. But if you're patient and you keep on working and nurturing, that 5th year will come for you too. And you will be astonished at the growth and change you see taking place. So patience is faith in action. Patience is emotional diligence. It's the willingness to suffer inside so that others can grow. It reveals love. It gives birth to understanding. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. It happens with me all the time. Do you have any questions? I know I was supposed to leave some time for Q&A, and we have a few minutes. Anybody have any questions or where to start or anything like that?
Jazakallahu khair, Miss Uzma, for this wonderful, I don't know where to start, but I do want to thank you for being with us this morning. And I want to acknowledge the presence of Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. Raza, Raza?
Yes.
With us this morning, the parents of Miss Uzma. Thank you for being with us this morning. Your talk brought to mind many points. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, اغتنم خمس قبل خمس, take advantage of 5 before 5. Your youth before you're old, you become old. Your health before you fall sick. Your richness before you become poor. And your free time before you become busy. And your life before your death. And I think it encompasses a lot of points you've made today. And to go back to the point about us being nice to people we don't really know or strangers, and we take advantage of those who we need to be really nice to them. And